So from the product line point of view, we have two, let's say, different lines of products. So one of them is going to be the ASA with Firepower services, which can be deployed in two modes: monitor mode, which is meant for demonstration purposes. So you would go in a customer network, you would put the ASA in transparent mode, and then via a span port, send all traffic to the ASA just to, provide, reports and demonstration of what would happen if that traffic would be inspected in real time. So like looking at the network in here, it means that you would have to, let's say you'd be in a customer network. This is, let's say, a customer network, and this in here is not an ASA, or this may be an ASA in here, this one in here may be an ASA but without firepower, or let's say a firewall of the customer, whatever. And you would want to bring in their ASA with firepower services to show the customer how good the product is, how does it look like, reporting, so the customer can see what kind of security the ASA with firepower services can provide, and get a base touch with the solution, and actually for sure he's gonna like it, if you ask me. So what do you do if this is the customer network? Then you don't want the customer doesn't want to reconfigure its IP addressing just for you to put in there a firewall, just because you want to do a demo. So what do you do? Let's say you go in whatever segment of the network, you go in here, let's say you put yourself in the middle, so you don't put the customer to reconfigure its IP addressing. You go in here, you put the ASA with Firepower services in here, in that segment. So ASA with Firepower services, Firepower. And clearly all traffic back and forth to the internet is going to travel to the segment. So all traffic going back and forth to the internet is going to travel to the segment. And what you do is that from the layer 2 switch connected to that VLAN, you do a span session to the ASA with Firepower services, and the ASA, it is going to inspect all traffic back and forth. Of course, you still need to grant the ASA access to the internet. Otherwise, without cloud connectivity, without updates back and forth, it's useless. It's a dumb device. So the ASA with Firepower service, even if it's in transparent mode, would still require to have internet access to speak with the cloud in order to to make use of the full product of its all functionalities back and forth. But of course, being in monitor mode, not being a layer 2 device, you lose some of the capabilities. The ASA can no longer discover the network properly, but still you have the customer can have a glimpse, a touch base with if the traffic is being sent back and forth in my network, is it malware, is it not malware, how many infected endpoints do I have so far, and things like that. So it is used in quick deployments when the customer doesn't want to reconfigure the network, rebuild the VLANs and things like that for whatever reasons. And of course, inline mode, that's what you would use for live environments where the ASA ideally runs in router mode. And it is going to be attached inline in the traffic. I'm not saying that when you put it in the customer network, it has to be in router mode, in layer 3 mode, but ideally it is going to be a layer 3 device to make use of all of the functionalities, not to lose any of those back and forth. So inline mode means that you would put it as it is here on the diagram on my side, as it is in here. So it is a big box, the ASA firewall, the physical one, with Firepower services attached to the box, which means it has layer 3. It's connected to multiple subnets. It is connected in different subnets. This is being like the inside interface connected to whatever subnet is there, VLAN 29. This being the outside interface connected to the internet, and this being the DMZ interface. So this being DMZ connected to some services, this one being the outside interface connected to the internet, and this one here being the inside one connected to the LAN side. So this is how you deploy it in general in a customer network, although of course you can also put it in transparent mode, but lose some of the capabilities. So a couple of options there. You can either use the ASA 5585X module, the bigger platform with let's say higher performance, in which case Firepower is going to be installed as one of the hardware modules. This box 5585X having two, let's say, hardware modules, and one of them would have to be the Firepower module. Otherwise, the 5585 could use both module just for regular ASA files or regular ASA file functionalities. But in this case, you would use one of those two hardware modules just to install the Firepower services. If we speak about the ASA 5512X to ASA 5555X, so 5512, 5515, 25, 45, 55X with ASAs, then in that case Firepower is installed as a software module, so it doesn't have a dedicated hardware module you can install it on. It's going to be installed as a software module, like an application running on top next side to the ASA code. And it requires requires that it's installed on the SSD devices. And based on the platforms, you know, one or more SSD can be supported based on the Firewall module. So you cannot install the Firepower services as a software module directly, you know, on the flash of the ASA like you do with the regular ASA Firewall code. You have to install that on the SSD, and the SSD is not built in on those platforms. You would have to acquire that separately. Of course, if you had on those devices deployed either the IPS functionality or the old ASA CX functionality, it means that you have those solid state drives already acquired. You can of course use it to install Firepower services. On the newer set of ASA X devices, the 5506X, 08X, and 16X, which also are let's say rugged versions of the ASA Firepower, ASA with Firepower services. They also have Wi-Fi built in. Either way, in that case, you can likewise install Firepower as a software module, and those devices have SSD embedded to begin with. So just a confirmation back again that audio didn't drop, because I see a couple of you out there saying that audio is gone. Can anyone confirm it still works? It should, but just to be on the safe side. Okay, thanks. There's a question there from user: does the ASAV or VOL support Firepower for lab purposes? As far as I'm aware, the ASAV and the ASA-SM module on the Cat6a, none of them support Firepower services. Quickly to confirm that, so I'm sure about the ASA security module. The last time I looked, which was a couple of months ago, also ASA didn't support it, and it should not. It doesn't make sense. Even before answering that question, and so I'm gonna give you my best shot even before, you know, answering. So for sure ASA-SM module doesn't support Firepower, and I would state also ASAV doesn't for a specific reason. Because basically let's think about it. In general, this is going to be one example I'm going to use now without even knowing the answer to make you know, always think about, you know, in general, like not to memorize and just to think about if that would be possible or not. So like we know that the Firepower is when you don't run the unified code, Firepower to be installed on the SA has to be installed on its dedicated physical module or on its dedicated software module, which is going to be on the SSD drive. So for that reason, from my point of view, there is no way they could add Firepower services on top of ASAV without running a unified code, because ASAV runs one code only and Firepower doesn't run as an application on top of the code. As you're going to see when you get to installation start, Firepower has its own boot operating system, and then you install the application on top of that. So for that reason, I don't see how they could make, you know, one DSAV, which is, you know, one instance, to be able to support two boot images at the same time to run both ASA code and Firepower services. But let's confirm that. So let's look at ASAV. Not, of course, Google. I don't trust Google, okay? Don't trust whatever people say. So just Cisco ASAV, and we're gonna see there if it's supported or not. It should not. It was not the last time I looked it up, but let's also confirm that. And doesn't look like as expected. Yep, it's not supported. For the same reason, the ASA SM module doesn't support it, because there is no room for that. You cannot install, you know, two boot operating systems and two applications at the same time on one hardware. So before, let's make sure there are no other questions in this line in here. Okay. Now, before we move to the other option, world, so let's look at the ASA with Firepower service datasheet. So for those of you who never you know, like recommended or deployed or to a customer or never sold such a product, so we have in here a lot of details on what to do. So like performance wise, scalability wise, what would you recommend to a customer, which version and why. Clearly we have a couple of inputs in there, as you can see, per type of device in here. Like this is going to be in here the physical platforms, and for each of those you have a clear definition of, you know, what is the maximum throughput of AVC. So if the customer wants to do, you know, when you design, when you implement something on a customer network like a next generation firewall, you want to know which capabilities are going to be activated and what is the performance, what kind of traffic, what is the level of traffic they want to inspect with those features turned on. You have the maximum. If you enable both AVC and IPS, performance drops down to half of it on this box. On this box is not half of it, is more than half. So each box is clearly different performance wise. Sizing throughput. So clearly I can you know, investigate, I can inspect up to 125 megs through AVC and IPS, but if you think about HTTP throughput with IPS is 90 megs. So if you actually inspect HTTP traffic with AVC and IPS is 90 megs per second. And of course then is the classical performance with maximum concurrent sessions, the regular one, maximum new connections per second, you know, and this is not only this is not performance data, just, you know, statistics data, URL categories, number of URL categorized, and so on. And what they don't state in here, and I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna state something in here. It's a big thing you always have to do, is, you know, because none of these platforms hardware-wise. So imagine that when Cisco has released the ASA-X platforms, they didn't intend at that point to support ASA with Firepower services on top of that. So clearly the hardware was not designed to support all of those new features, so that's why the performance is not that great. So what I'm trying to say is, when you enable AMP in here, even though they state, like, you know, we have when we have actually what's interesting in here, they say nothing about AMP, right? So they state that if you enable AVC, is that performance, AVC and IP is that performance, then if it's AVC and IPS for HTTP is that performance. But if you look it up for AMP, probably they don't state anything at all, AMP. Yeah. So basically for AMP, because the platforms were not designed, the hardware was not designed to support AMP, which clearly is, a resource. When enable AMP, it consumes a lot of resources. Ideally, what you would do is when something is missing from the data sheet, you don't go to the customer and just propose a solution or believing it's going to work. So like in this case, clearly what you would do is you would go to and ask Cisco and saying, hey, I want to implement this ASA, looks good from the performance point of view, but I want to enable AMP. What is the AMP performance for this specific box? And they're going to tell you, and based on that, you're going to be able to offer to the customer a product which he can use from the performance point of view. And of course, further down, except AMP, you also have the regular, let's say, criterias, which are not important ASA ones. Firewall inspection, multi-protocol, which multi-protocol means not only HTTP and HTTPS, triple LS encryption, and so on. I'm not going to get to those details. Web VPN, peers, and things like that. Not interested from the scope of the class. Okay. Question from user: what about when you turn on protect control URL filtering and AMP? I haven't seen a data sheet including this, but I've seen the sheet from the business units. Exactly. So that's what I was saying. You see that only from the business units, and it is what it is. It's something that Cisco doesn't, make it publicly available. In general, a lot of vendors, no vendor does everything publicly available. Everybody keeps some things for themselves. It is what it is. So not only Cisco does that, it is fair game. Okay, so that's one way of having firepower in the network. The other way, which is the new way, is via the firepower threat defense, which is the unified code for ASA, firewall, and firepower. Does not support all combined features yet. So as I was saying, it is clearly not a 100% a mature product yet. But I'm sure Cisco is gonna within months or within this by the end of the year, you're gonna make sure they add all capabilities out there to properly support, to have a one code with all features required by their customers in there. Clearly, they're gonna release new features on the code based on requirements, but moving forward, they're gonna have pretty much everything supported in there. And when you're gonna speak about the firepower, so this code depends on it's supported on specific platforms. It's gonna be supported on the latest generation of firewalls from Cisco, the 4100 series and the 9300 series, and also on the ASX series, except the 5585X platforms, which my assumption is that is gonna be like end of sale, because it is pretty much the oldest product among all Cisco's, let's say, next generation firewalls. It's an old hardware which pretty much is expensive and doesn't doesn't offer a lot of performance as the new boxes, the new hardware versions do, because the new hardware is built, clearly designed with the mindset to support one code with all services and to offer performance in there. And to prove that, for example, so if you look in here on the ASA 55X with firepower services, so this one supports, let's see, AVC and AVC with IPS. The biggest box of 5000 X series supports 1.7 gig of AVC, 1.2 gig or NAVC and IPS, and actually if that's for HTTP, 725 megs of that. While if you look at the newer, let's say, hardware platforms, which you're going to be running the new code, the unified code, it is way different. Like there we go. you have three options at this point available, three hardware modules for the 4000 series, one which is going to be coming whenever Cisco is going to make it available, and you also have, that's the 4000 series, and you have three physical modules, let's say, with the 9300 series, which is actually the same physical platform that you're going to be using to add one or more modules in there with different performances. But as you can see clearly, it has a huge difference performance wise. Like for example, the AVC, when you do firewall with AVC, you can go up to 100 gig or 12 gigabits on the lowest platform of 4000 series. Well, if you remember, when the ASA 5000X series, the highest number was 1.2 gig. And here the lowest platform is 12 gig. Likewise, if you go to the when you enable firewall, regular state of firewall with AVC and next generation IPS, of course the performance drops down a bit, but not that much. So the lowest platform can support 10 gig of that. So clearly this is, as I was saying, it means that they optimize the hardware properly, and the code clearly runs way better internally, the unified code, to be able to sustain that performance. So you can go to 90 gigs of that. And of course, let's not speak about, when this is going to make available on unified code clustering. So imagine how it's going to be to put, 16 boxes of, 90 gigs in a cluster. That is some performance in there. Okay, so those are the options to let's say run Firepower in the network today. At this point, if I would be asked by a customer, I would still recommend, of course, given that the performance is going to be good enough, I would still recommend the regular older codes. Of course, depends on which feature the customer wants. So I would make an analysis to see if what a customer wants today the unified code supports, and of course if the performance required, then we're going to go with the unified code and new platforms. Otherwise, if if the customer wants some features which are not supported by the new code, the unified code, or he doesn't need that much of a performance, then clearly go to the ASX series, because clearly the new hardware devices, the new hardware platforms are going to be way more expensive because they provide huge performance in there.